For a long time, mini PCs were the kind of thing you'd only buy if your needs were basic, like web browsing, emails, or maybe streaming some Netflix. But recently, they've gotten way more capable. And with CPUs and GPUs becoming more power efficient, these tiny boxes are starting to promise desktop-level performance in a fraction of the space. So, naturally, we wanted to find out, can you actually game on one of these and have it feel anything like a proper gaming desktop experience? Let's find out. Before we dive into the gaming performance, let's talk a bit about what kind of user each system is actually made for, because specs alone don't tell the whole story. Starting with mini PCs, the big draw here is obviously the size. These things are incredibly compact. You can put them behind a monitor, in a backpack, or tuck them into any setup without dominating your desk. They're perfect for small spaces, LAN parties, esports, or anyone who moves around often. And because they use far less power, they run cooler, quieter, and are generally more energy efficient overall. That said, there are trade-offs. Most mini PCs don't leave much room for upgrades. You can usually upgrade the RAM and storage, but not the CPU or GPU. And because of their compact design, they tend to run hotter under load. Thermal throttling is a real thing, especially during long gaming sessions. Plus, when you compare price to performance, you often end up paying more per frame than you would with a similarly priced gaming desktop. Now, on the flip side, a full-sized gaming desktop is still the go-to if you care about absolute performance. These systems are built for power. You can run an RTX 5090, a high-end Ryzen 9 or Core i9, stacking fans or liquid cooling, whatever you need. And because the cases are bigger, airflow is way better, which helps with long-term thermal stability and noise control. Another huge plus is upgradability. You can swap almost every part in a desktop, whether it's adding more storage, upgrading the GPU, or even replacing the motherboard down the line. That flexibility makes them a lot more future-proof compared to compact builds. Of course, they're not without downsides. Desktops are bulky. They take up a lot of space, they're not easy to move, and they tend to draw more power, especially if you're gaming or rendering regularly. So with all that in mind, we wanted to put our two systems to the test and see how much of that theory holds up when you're actually gaming. Let's get into the performance. Starting with the specs. The Aximagician Mini PC runs on the Ryzen 5 5560U with a boost clock of 4.3 GHz, 16 GB of DDR4 RAM, and 512 GB of SSD storage. For graphics, it relies on the Radeon Vega integrated GPU. The system is tiny, quiet, and comes pre-installed with Windows 11 Pro. It even supports dual display output and 4K at 60 Hz through HDMI and DisplayPort. Our gaming desktop, on the other hand, has a 10th Gen i5-10400, GTX 1660, and 32 GB of DDR4 RAM. It's running Windows 11 Pro and is used daily for editing, gaming, and streaming. So on paper, these systems aren't in the same category. But we were curious, how much of a gap is there, really, when you sit down to game? We started with some lighter titles. On the mini PC, we launched CS2, Valorant, and Fortnite at 1080p with medium settings. Performance here was honestly better than we expected. All three games ran above 60 FPS, and gameplay felt smooth. Inputs were responsive, and visuals were clean. Not ultra-detailed, but good enough to enjoy without distraction. On the desktop, of course, the same games ran like butter. 200 plus FPS, higher settings, higher resolution. But here's the thing. Unless you're using a high refresh rate monitor or are super competitive, the difference is nice, but not necessary. Then we loaded GTA 5 and Genshin Impact. The mini PC still held up, 40 to 50 FPS on medium settings, and it was actually enjoyable. It started to drop in the more demanding scenes, but not enough to ruin the experience. Now comes the reality check. We booted up Cyberpunk 2077. On the mini PC, even with everything set to low, frame rates dropped into the 20s, and stutter became noticeable. The game ran, yes, but the experience wasn't what we'd call playable. This is where integrated graphics hit their limit. On the desktop, same game, ultra settings, ray tracing on, and we were getting 70 to 80 FPS with DLSS. The difference here wasn't subtle, it was massive. It wasn't just a visual jump, it was the difference between struggling through a game and actually enjoying it. So what's causing this huge gap? The answer is simple: power and thermals. The Ryzen 5 560U inside the mini PC is a 15 to 25 watt chip, meaning it's extremely power efficient. That's great for thermals and noise, but it also limits performance. The small chassis of the Axie Magician doesn't allow for large heat sinks or fans, so the chip has to stay within tight thermal constraints. Meanwhile, our desktop doesn't have this limitation. It has a dedicated GPU that draws well over 170 watts, a CPU with a much higher power ceiling, and cooling designed for sustained performance. It doesn't need to throttle, and it won't, even after hours of gaming or rendering. And that brings us to benchmarks. On Cinebench R23, the mini PC scored 6,460 multi-core and 1,297 single-core, which looks solid on paper. But real-world performance, especially when CPU and GPU are both under load, here tells a different story. That's because synthetic tests often isolate either the CPU or the GPU. In the mini PC, since the GPU is integrated and shares thermal and power limits with the CPU, they can't both run at full speed at the same time. In gaming, which is a combined workload, performance drops as the chip tries to balance both. The desktop doesn't have this problem. Its CPU and GPU have independent thermal zones, independent power delivery, and higher limits overall, so they can both push full performance together. Power usage is another area where the difference was clear. The mini PC idled around 10 watts, and under gaming load we saw around 70 to 75 watts. That's incredibly efficient compared to a full desktop. But keep in mind, even though it uses less power, it still generates a fair amount of heat, especially during long sessions. And with less room for airflow, that heat can build up faster than it would in a larger case. The desktop, meanwhile, idled around 70 watts and jumped to 250 to 300 watts while gaming. That's expected. It's pushing higher frame rates, more pixels, and more demanding settings. So while the mini PC is more power efficient overall, it's not immune to heat. It just manages it differently, quieter, but sometimes closer to its thermal limits. Both systems also support modern connectivity. The mini PC has USB-C, HDMI, DisplayPort, dual LAN, USB 3.0, and even a headphone jack, all packed into a chassis you could fit behind your monitor. The display output supports 4K at 60 Hz, and file transfers via USB were quick during our testing. The desktop has even more: multiple display outputs, front and rear USB headers, and full-size ports. But in everyday use, the mini PC didn't feel limited at all. And one thing we liked, the SSD and RAM in the mini PC are not soldered. That means you can open it up and upgrade both. No GPU upgrade path obviously, but at least storage and memory can grow with your needs. So can you replace your desktop with a mini PC? If you're doing light gaming, esports titles, media streaming, or just everyday computing, the Axie Magician Mini Gaming PC actually holds up better than you'd expect. It's small, efficient, quiet, and still capable. But if your focus is on modern AAA games, long sessions, or content creation, the desktop is still king. Not because mini PCs aren't good, but because physics is physics. You simply can't match the cooling, the wattage, and the raw GPU power that a full system gives you. Let us know in the comments. Would you ever consider ditching your desktop for something this small? Or are you sticking with the heavyweights? Thanks for watching.